My name is Jill. I am a student of the fantastic Sheryl Lee, who is a wonderful actress, an amazing human being, and one of the best teachers anybody could hope to encounter. She was nice enough to sit down and speak with me over the phone about a little bit about her past, her projects, and what's going on in her life today. This interview was recorded, transcribed, and edited mainly to hide all of the technical flubs and missteps that I couldn't avoid, as well as some incomprehensibly untranscribable fits of giggles about unpredictability and other super unprofessional nonsense. So let's jump right into our interview with Sheryl Lee. When and how did you know that you needed to act?
That question takes me back decades and decades. I was studying to be a dancer. That was my first love. And I was in high school. And I was about 14 or 15 years old. And I was in a sledding accident and messed up my knee really bad and ended up on crutches for months and months and had knee surgery and was not able to dance that season and was going stir crazy. And my mom said, well, why don't you try out for the play? And I was way too shy. I thought, there's no way that I can speak in front of people. Dancing is one thing, but you don't have to talk. And then the English teacher was also the theater department head at my high school and directing the play. And he also suggested, why don't you try out for the play? Because at this point I was no longer on crutches. I could, walk again, but I couldn't dance. I was still recovering. Mm-hmm. So finally I tried out. And the play was The Bad Seed. And I was playing the mom. And the first day of rehearsals, I went, oh my gosh, this is it. This is very different than I thought because it's not my words. It's not me having to come up with something to say. It's not me speaking in front of these people. It's the character's words, it's the writer's words. And I fell in love with the collaboration that was happening in rehearsals. That to me was just thrilling. And a bit like dance in that way. So that was the beginning of a very, very long journey. The Bad Seed. And then I did The Haunting of Hill House.
That must have been a really good theater department.
It was a good theater department. I mean, I don't have anything to compare it to in terms of, that high school, but it had a very strong art department in all arts, which was wonderful, and I'm very grateful that I got to, go to a high school that supported the arts as much as they did.
Now, with the arts, you act and you teach and you write and you direct. Are there other ways, and you dance, are there other ways that you want to learn or that you enjoy expressing your creativity?
Well, I did also draw in high school, and then as an adult took many painting classes, which I loved, and may someday go back to. We'll see.
Someday. That's a maybe.
Yes.
Well, I recommend drawing very much.
Yeah, well, that comes from a very talented person, you. I'm glad you are drawing.
So working with you and Gary in the actor directors workshops, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit, and in private coaching lessons, I can attest to how brilliant you are and the results that you can elicit from a person as a teacher. When and how did you know that you were supposed to teach?
Well, that is very kind of you. I appreciate your very generous words. Um, I I was fortunate enough to have in my life many wonderful teachers. And I don't mean just acting teachers. I always loved to learn. So in between acting jobs, I was always studying. And often I was studying things that didn't have anything to do with acting. In fact, I often was not studying acting. I was studying other things, whether it was painting or um, energetic healing or all different kinds of things. So I had many wonderful teachers, and I always felt very grateful for my teachers, and I felt that part of my way of expressing that gratitude would be to someday pass it along. You know, it's like a river, um, that we must keep the water of that wisdom flowing. I didn't know when I would teach or what that would look like. And uh, it kind of organically and naturally, the timing presented itself to me before I made the conscious decision, oh, now is the time. It was as if I was shown when it was the right time by a series of events and synchronicities. And so I'd always stayed open uh, to the possibility of it. And so when the time presented itself, I jumped in.
Well, I'm so glad you did. Can you talk a little about what you and Gary are doing with the workshops?
So Gary and I created this workshop called the Actors Director Workshop. And obviously Gary and I have known each other for quite a few decades from Twin Peaks when we were youngsters. And we hadn't seen each other for a long time. And then more than several years ago, actually, it must have been 7 or 8 years ago now, we ran into each other at a Twin Peaks dinner. And we were talking after about what we each were doing. And we each at that point were starting to sort of teach on our own privately. And we were talking about that, and we were brainstorming about how few times in our careers we had been fortunate enough to work on a set that felt really collaborative. That it often felt as if the actors were scared of the directors, or the directors were too intimidated to give the actors direction, or there was a lot of wonderful technical training coming out of the acting schools, but that not enough communication skills. So that was sort of the birth of it, and that's our goal and our intention is to create a community and a safe place for actors, directors, editors, photographers, writers to come and to play together and to collaborate together and communicate with each other. And then what our hope is that they then can take that out in the community and they can stay connected and work together and inspire each other and also support each other, because the entertainment industry can feel very isolating at times. And so to be able to create relationships where they have each other's backs and they're there for each other can really be a good support network as they move into their filmmaking futures.
You mentioned a lot of creative media that weren't necessarily directly related to acting and directing. Who would you say should attend the workshops?
For me, I feel like anyone in any form of creative art. That's my personal opinion about it. We have had editors in there. We have had musicians in there and photographers. So I feel like anyone who has an impulse to creatively express themselves, this is a place where we encourage keeping that channel of creativity open and keeping that also that sense of play, because sometimes the work environment for an artist can start to kind of strip away that feeling of play. But that feeling of play and that sense of discovery and exploration, that's the gold. So we, in our workshops, whether it's a full day workshop or an ongoing class or a 2-day workshop intensive, we want you to be able to mine for that gold.
Calling back to when you were talking about your teachers, what would you say is maybe the greatest lesson that you've learned from the variety of teachers that you've had in your life? And maybe connected with that, maybe one lesson that you'd like to pass along to anyone who's willing to learn.
That is such a beautiful question, Joe. Such a beautiful question.
I'll take your time if you like.
The one very consistent wisdom, skill, gift, offering that all of my teachers had in any medium, whatever they were teaching, whether they were acting teachers or spiritual teachers or healing teachers or painting teachers, they all had a feeling of deep, deep patience and deep, curious listening. So for the student, me being the student, I never felt rushed. I never felt that there was any sort of expectation for me to come up with an answer or be a certain way or that I had to be a good student.
Right.
There was just...
Whatever that is.
Yes, exactly. There was this expansive feeling of space. So going back to my intention with Gary and this creating of a space that allows for discovery, that allows for exploration, that allows for the deeper layers to reveal themselves. That takes time and willingness and openness, and that's not a process that can be rushed. So that is the consistent offering that all of my teachers have had.
Well, you definitely have that as well, from what I've seen. So it's much appreciated.
Thank you.
Switching gears a little bit, you've generally been cast in very dramatic and horror roles. What do you hope that people take away from your performances and the stories that you've been part of?
When I look back at my work, which I don't often do, but if I, in a case like this where I'm asked a question and I sort of see all the women that I've played, I have I have played a lot of women who have gone through a lot and have had a lot happen to them. Even when I was younger and I was playing women that were younger, they've all been through a lot. And I think the biggest thing that I would hope that I could offer in the telling of their stories is that the viewer recognizes something familiar and that it somehow can offer them comfort in that they are not alone. That in the telling of this woman's story or this girl's story, that there is a recognition of humanity, of they're not alone in their suffering.
Oh, beautiful. And that actually ties directly into a question that I had. I was skipping around, and now I've got a couple of Lynch questions for you. Most of your David Lynch and Twin Peaks experiences have been covered extremely well over the years, and so I didn't really want to add any, but I feel like I'd be remiss if I just skipped over. So your most famous role, at least that I know of, is that of Laura Palmer, who's an incest rape murder victim, and I've seen firsthand through the fan base how that role has touched countless lives in so many ways. And with the understanding that you aren't a licensed counselor, what would you like to say to victims of incest and rape and sexual abuse who have survived?
I think the biggest thing is, again, you are not alone. We now have tremendous support that is only a phone call away. To reach out, to lean on that support. It's not your fault that this happened to you. You deserve love. You deserve to be supported by love, embraced by love, by a community that can help hold you up.
Amen. Beautiful. Whether you've intended to or not, you've sort of become a face of hope for a lot of these people, women and men, who have gone through that particular kind of hell. And I know more recently you've been attending more fan events, and I've seen you connect with these people on such a base level, and you make them feel that they're not alone. And it's wonderful that you're able to direct them toward some kind of help and healing. How do you find the peace to deal with that level of intensity?
I feel so deeply touched when someone who I've never met before and someone who's never met me before trusts me enough to share their heart and their story of survival. There are no words in a way for me to even, touched just seems even too small of a word. It truly moves me that is shared with me, because I understand that even for someone to get to the point where they can verbalize that pain is such a huge step. And then to share it with me, it gives me comfort for them in knowing that they have reached that point where they're able to share it. Yeah, I know what a huge step in healing that is.
What a what a what a privilege, what a gift from both sides. Um, so since you played Laura Palmer, things have changed a bit, and you're a mother now. So from the perspective of a mother, if the character of Laura Palmer was a real person and she had lived to adulthood, what would, if she had lived, what would your hope be for her life?
Mm. That she also get healing and
Yeah,
a support system and as much love around her as she could.
wonderful. Okay, moving on out of Twin Peaks. Let's see. Is there such a thing for you as a typical day in your life as an actor or actress, whichever you prefer?
Well, if it's when I'm actually filming, then it would depend whether or not I was on location or whether or not I was at home. Uh, Certain things would be the same in terms of trying to have as much quiet time as I could because that's a big part of my creative process. And also seeking out nature anywhere, anytime, as much as I can. For me is a large part of my creative process, and it's also a large part of my healing process. It's in a way how I gather information and how I let go. So those
Beautiful.
things would be similar, no matter where I was. Those things would be similar.
Are there any specific charities important to you that you'd encourage those who have the means to support?
Oh my gosh, where do we start right now? You know, certainly the Center for Biological Diversity is a big one for me right now for wildlife. Um, the strong ones right now that help stop these devastating shootings. Planned Parenthood. I'm also a believer in finding something local, whether it's, I have a tendency to always seek out animal sanctuaries, um, where you can go and you can adopt a specific animal, and you get to learn also because I love to learn.
Uh-huh. What is next for you?
Well, I have, I think, a couple more conventions this year. I have a one-day play that looks like it may happen. And then there are a couple other things that, one is an independent film, that are sort of in the process of not knowing yet when they're happening. I very rarely, unless I'm teaching at a college, but specifically for that quarter or that semester, I very rarely know my schedule a month out.
Wow.
Yeah.
How does that work for you? Is it
It is a wonderful practice in being in the moment. There are times when I'm so used to it because it's been that way for so many decades. When you work, I think, I've never worked in a big budget film, but my understanding from friends who have is when you work in a big budget film, you know quite a ways out that you're going to be working on that film. When you work in independent films, you don't. You can know 4 days out. You can know 2 weeks out. So my whole career has been that way, where I think one time I knew a month out, and I just remember over and over thinking, what an incredible luxury this is, because I love to research, and I had a month to research, and it was a Bible story, so I had a lot of research to do. Other than that, it truly is living in the moment and trusting and faith. And it can get very uncomfortable, believe me. It can get very uncomfortable, the not knowing, the trying to plan other parts of your life, the financial not knowing. It can all take me out of my comfort zone. And it is a constant practice in working out the muscle of being present in this moment.
Yeah, minute to minute, sometimes it sounds like.
Yes, very true, Jill. Very true. Week to week, day by day, it changes every day. I
Oh, my
don't ever
word.
have 2 days that are the same.
Oh, my word. Um,
hmm
well, if our readers or you would like more information about the workshops or what you'll be doing next, where should they look for information?
That is so funny. I love that you said that. It is true, because there are often times where fans will say, "Oh, I'll see you in some city or something," that I didn't even know that I was going to yet. As you know, Joe, I'm not super fancy with technology. I think it's theactorsdirector.com.
We'll put the link. We'll put the link.
Please. Yes.
Um, is there anything that you wish that I'd asked but didn't?
Oh my gosh, you have the most wonderful, thoughtful questions. I have to say, I'm so impressed with your questions. You asked many questions that I have never been asked in all of these years of doing this. So thank you for your thoughtfulness and your kindness.
Oh, well, absolutely. I wasn't fishing for a compliment, but thank you. And I'm glad.
Yeah.
Are there any words or anything you'd like to leave the readers with before we close?
Yes, just thank you again to them, because I've said it before and I'm going to keep saying it. It's the fans and the readers and the viewers that keep us having the ability to tell our stories, whether it's keeping Twin Peaks alive for all these years, or whether it's stories about survivors, or whether it's stories about women, or stories about women of a certain age, which we need much more of. It's the viewers that blow on those flames of life. So deep gratitude for that.
Oh, thank you so much for taking time out. I know your schedule is crazy and unpredictable, and for lending us some of your energy to talk with us. And you give so much of yourself to your fans and your students and everyone that you encounter. So it's a privilege and an honor to speak with you today and let everyone get to know you a little bit better.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And yeah, that's it.